Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praises to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. I pray the Most High blesses this lesson this evening, gives us more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past in order to understand events that are currently happening on the earth. So we get a much better understanding of the things that are soon to come on the earth. Brethren, we're going to take a look at some history. And now that the Most High has blessed us with more understanding, when we're reading these different books, these people are telling on themselves. There's so much information coming out about how sophisticated and advanced the people were before the Edomites and the Gentiles were given the reins over the earth. You start to hear a lot about the 1600s and pretty much like how history only started in the 1600s and the 1500s, 1400s, but anything before that doesn't count. And you're going to see right now when we read this paragraph from this book we're going to talk about right now this evening. Now, you've used it before. We're going to just take a look at one paragraph, but with the understanding that the Most High has blessed us with, we're going to get a much deeper understanding. And now that we, are able to read these passages with newfound understanding given to us by the Most High, it opens up our world tremendously. Now, I guess pretty soon they're going to be disclosing some things about UFOs. I guess I think with the Trump in his last act, he passed something that was actually for the recovery for the plague, and in there, I think it was something about having to do some kind of a report on UFOs, and there's all this technology that we know exists that's far beyond the capabilities of the Gentiles right now, and they've just been able to just dismiss it for all of these years, even though they have all this proof that these UFOs about aliens and all these different things. But see, they've been making it seem as if they just been able to dismiss it, not talk about it. But now that we're getting towards the end, and we're starting to realize that the people that were here before the 1600s, before the Edomites got rule and reign over everything, were way more advanced. They were able to use the technology. And what you're going to see right now is that you're going to see the difference between when we reigned and how we could use the technology, and then how that all changed once the Edomites were given their time, once the Gentiles were given their reign. See, we were in tune with the Most High. We were in tune with the spirit world. So therefore, our people were able to do miraculous things because we were in tune with nature, with the Most High, with His creation. That's what the other nations have been so hell-bent with keeping us away from. Now, in hindsight's 2020, when you look back, you really see why it was so important to keep us from reading, so important to keep us away from other books. Because once the Most High gave us that spirit, it opens up our understanding so much more. Let's take a listen real fast from this paragraph, and then we'll kind of delve more into this information.
Traditional peoples resorted to these places to contact the spirit world, to dream, to worship, to be initiated or healed. They also cursed or invoked at them. But after the 17th century watershed, as the Age of Reason arose, a different approach to these sites developed. People called antiquarians emerged, and an intellectual interest was generated about the sites. Who built them? How old were they? What was their purpose? They became objects of curiosity and study instead of use. It was a consequence of the final veils of amnesia that had fallen across the face of the former world.
Okay. Now, these are talking about sacred sites. Now, before these sacred sites were actually in use, we were actually able to use these sacred sites. That was part of our blessing, this knowledge, understanding, and the ability to use these sacred sites. But once we fell, these sacred sites just became places of study. They were not in use anymore. So now it makes sense when you're looking at all of these documentaries, all these, they sit there and try to give you all this information about, oh, well, this is for this and this is for that. All they're doing is talking about study. They're just studying the places, but they're not talking about who used them, how were they used, what is their purpose. That's not what they know that they can't use these sites. They know that they can't tap in to these places. So they just, cover it up, build over it, put their churches on top of it. Maybe they get a little bit of a benefit from being on the ley lines and being in certain areas, but they're not able to tap in and get the full benefits because it was not given to them. Let's listen to this one more time.
Traditional peoples resorted to these places to contact the spirit world, to dream, to worship, to be initiated or healed. They also cursed or invoked at them. But after the 17th century watershed, as the Age of Reason arose, a different approach to these sites developed. People called antiquarians emerged, and an intellectual interest was generated about the sites. Who built them? How old were they? What was their purpose? They became objects of curiosity and study instead of use. It was a consequence of the final veils of amnesia that had fallen across the face of the former world.
The amnesia of the former world. The former world was the world before Esau and the Gentiles were raised up. And all we hear is speculation. Most of the time, that's all that we hear when you look at these shows. And they're always giving you their opinions. But they present their opinions as facts. But see, there's so much to unpack in just this paragraph right here. Because now when you look at these, at these shows, it's always, well, we're not sure exactly what they did, but this is what they did. We're not sure exactly who built it, but this is who built it. That's why they try to put people in these lands now and make it seem as if they're the ones that were there the whole time, that they're the ones that were there before the 1600s, that no one ever moved. And this is how it's always been. This is why now you understand with the colleges and how they've set up, people with their PhDs and, and all their doctorates and, all their credentials so that they could just give you their opinion and say it's a fact. There's all these sacred sites, but they're not trying to teach people how to use them. They're realizing, they're talking now about all these megalithic structures. And they're like, they don't understand how they moved it. They don't understand how they made these huge rocks and how they moved them, how they used them. They didn't know how they have the technology to be able to just create all these huge structures. They don't. I actually was watching another video and it was talking about how, what is it? One of the pyramids and Egypt in Giza was actually resonates and actually makes electricity. And I guess the guy has like a lot of information about that, and I actually said it makes a lot of sense. So it wasn't they weren't just tombs for kings, but they were actually uh, places of actually making power. Now they can't do that. They can't actually make the power because all they can do at this time is just study these sacred places. That's it. That's all that they can do. They don't have the power to, actually use these structures. So you see the difference. Like, it pretty much goes to 1600, and after that, all they do at this point is just, you know, they're just places of study. All they do is just study the places, but they don't use them. People that were here before the 1600s, before the Renaissance, those were the ones that were actually using the sites. Okay, and that's like I said, that's huge, and that's a huge for understanding. Now you got to start to think, well, who were the people that were here before the 1600s? Who were the people that were actually using this, this technology? Who gave them this technology? See, these are the things that have been hidden. This is why, they don't want to talk about anything about like Atlantis and these different places that had all of this technology that was way beyond what we see today. And I was listening to a video, and it was just talking about the UFOs and how they're so much faster than the ships, than the airplanes, and they're it actually makes it very, I'm sure, pretty scary to a lot of these these soldiers, these pilots, because they think they're the baddest thing in the air, but they're not. The Most High, you know, um, he's the one that gives that technology. These planes and these aircraft carriers, they're not, you know, they're not the epitome of power. The Most High is. We know that there are ships all over the place. We know that there's a technology that's way beyond anything here. We know the Most High is ready to crack these skies open at any time. And we know the Most High, when it talks about restoring his people, it's talking about restoring also the technology that we had before. It's restoring the world to what it was before. That's why the world right now is mourning, because these sacred sites, they could actually be used to actually put the world back in balance the way it's supposed to be. I said these things will be used once again. Right now, like I said, these places that can be used to actually give a benefit to the world are not being used. They're just places of study. That's why we need to continue to pray that the Most High renews the world, renews his people, places them back on top. These blessings, like I said, there's so much that goes along with the blessings that we didn't know. Now we understand why it was so important to keep us from this understanding. Now we understand why it's so important to keep us from this kind of knowledge. Once you have that understanding, just imagine, like, before we realized who we were, before we realized that we were not just relegated to one little itty bitty place in the so-called Middle East. We Our focus was always on that little itty bitty strip of land and any little thing that happens over there, and trying to fit all these different things into prophecy right now. I'm still listening to many people talking about, yes, they're admitting now that America is under judgment and things like that, but they still refuse to look at what they did to our people. It's still only about abortion. It's still only about, oh, we took prayer out of school. Oh, it's those things like that. Oh, we aren't supporting Israel enough. They still refuse to look at what they've done to the Most High's chosen people. Now, when you start looking at the Odes of Solomon, Psalms of David, and these hidden books, when it talks about them obliterating, you know, any knowledge of who we are. See, this knowledge is not just about our not just about who we are as far as just being Hebrew Israelites. It's much deeper than just that. It's also about these sacred sites. It's also about the connection that we have to the earth. It's also the connection that we have to the universe. It's also about the connection that we have to the spirit world where we originated from. It's about how the Most High is awakening us to make spiritual connections once again. It's much deeper than anything that we could imagine. And we have places like here, like Stonehenge is a prime example right here. See, we would use these places. Okay, now they are just about study. All it's just about, pretty much just asking, well, who did this? Who brought this here? Who were the people that did this? That's all that it is. It's not about how do we use these things. What do we, all they give is just their opinions. But that's exactly what the Most High, is transitioning us to. Transition us back to where we were before, giving us our knowledge, understanding, giving us our history, making us connect once again. Connect to the earth, connect to one another, connect to the Most High, connect to the earthly mother. Now it seems to make so much more sense about why, when we bring up the earthly mother and the Holy Spirit, how we had so much pushback. Hindsight's 2020. When you look back, you start to see, how people were reacting to this information. And now it makes much more sense. Now we can take this understanding and go forward and get so much more understanding. We're praying to be raised back up to be able to use these sacred sites once again. We're praying to be able to use these sacred sites in order to bring the world back into balance, to bring the animals, the water, the air, the trees, the grass, everything back into balance and then back to its original, status. All praise is to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who was wisdom? Who was the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Shalom.